This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome, colleagues. It's Tamara Credo speaking from Cochrane, South Africa, at the South African Medical Research Council. It's just after 2 and it's our monthly webinar series. And sadly, this is our last one for the year, but we're ending on a high because I'm delighted to be introducing Dr. Duduzile Ndwande, who's an important member of our team at the center, who's leading the work with the South African National Clinical Trials Registry, amongst her many other duties. And I'm going to hand over to Dudu, who's going to speak to us about the redevelopment of SANCTR and generally about registry, clinical trial registration. So Dudu, thank you so much, and I'll leave it to you to add in any extra intro information that you want to share about yourself and also to the talk. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tamara. Welcome everyone to this first of many webinars. So we're gonna, I'm gonna just take you through what has occurred in terms of the South African National Clinical Trial Register, and actually introducing the new database. So it's kind of like difficult to compact everything in one session. So I'm hoping for multiple sessions, but today I think I want to focus on the fundamentals of how do you register, and some of the questions and the queries that I had received since we've been live. Just to answer some of the questions. So this is kind of it's a discussion really, and if you've got questions around how to, if you've accessed the new SANCTR system and you had challenges, we can engage on that and see how I could answer some of those questions. But basically, the whole point is to re-emphasize, why do we have a register? Why do we have SANCTR? Let me just move my slides. There we go. So our objectives for today, for today's session, is that we're going to define what is a clinical trial registry, and then we're going to look at what do we mean by a clinical trial, and look at the definition and what is accepted in our registries, and also highlight the registries that are available for South African researchers. If you want to conduct a clinical trial, where can you go? Because that seems to be a question that is coming up. And lastly, I'll just take you through the process of how to register a clinical trial on SANCTR, and kind of like revealing the new SANCTR database if you had not accessed it and if you had not seen it. So just jumping right along, what is a clinical trial register? So it's basically a database in which key administrative and scientific information about planned, ongoing, and completed trials, which is sufficient to identify that the trial exists, is stored. So basically, it's kind of like a portal where you can say, here is a trial, and I can identify all the features of a trial should be captured in a register. So that's the definition of a clinical trial register. And why do we need a clinical trial? Why do we need to register a clinical trial? I mean, there's a number of reasons for that, and I think it's even evident now with the number of COVID-19 trials that are happening that we need information to be publicly available, and we need to ensure that we reduce publication bias. By publication bias, we refer to when, for example, you've got a trial and you've conducted it, and then your findings are not attractive, if I can call it that way, and you choose not to publish or share that information. Because if you remember, in science and in research, we build on knowledge. So even if it's negative data or negative results that you would have received in your trial, it's important to share that information so that others can build on to what you have done, and see why the study did not work out, and then we add on to the science knowledge. And also, the other important thing is reducing selective outcome reporting, because a registry allows us to prospectively register what are the outcomes that we want to measure in this particular trial. So now when you publish your study, it would be important to also indicate, out of all the outcomes that you had planned to assess, are you able to now report on all of those outcomes? Or are you missing some? What is the reason for that? And kind of like see where are the gaps and how can you add on to that? And the second point is that to register a trial, it fulfills the publication mandate. What do we mean by a publication mandate? A publication mandate is that when you're conducting a clinical trial, and if you want to publish your results or the findings of your clinical trial, some journals would not publish your findings of a clinical trial if it's not if that trial has not been registered in a clinical trial register. So this comes from a collective of journal editors, which is called the ICMJE. They came together and recognized that they are making it mandatory for all clinical trials studies, clinical trials that are conducted to be registered in a registry, so that when they are published, you could then indicate that yes, indeed, this clinical trial was registered in a clinical trial register, and we can see what you had planned to do, and what we are reporting now in a publication is exactly what you said you were going to do. And the next point, it's about ethical mandate. What do we mean by an ethical mandate? An ethical mandate is that whatever that you are doing, remember when you are conducting a clinical trial, you involving human participants. Human participants have a right to know whether what whether if they have invested time in participating in that trial, they need to know the outcomes of the study that they participated in. And I think it's only fair that they know what they have contributed to, because they are investing their time and their energy in or putting themselves at risk. Remember, a clinical trial, it's testing an intervention of something that you don't know whether it works or it doesn't work. So you have to put it out there, and that fulfills the ethical mandate that you share the information of the trial. And also, adding to the point about the ethical mandate is that it allows for transparency and ensuring there's public trust. So if anyone is looking at a clinical trial, or there's news that is happening in the media about the results of a clinical trial that is conducted, but if there's no transparency in how that trial is being conducted, uh, the general public will kind of like not trust what you are saying, and there will be conspiracy theories. And I think it's fitting when we talk about clinical trial registers and registries to in this time, in the space of COVID-19, as we saw, there's a lot of misinformation, but if we can access that information in a clinical trial registry, we can understand what is it that they were planning on doing, what was the time, the time period that the trial needs to be conducted, what were the outcomes that they wanted to measure. So that's why it's important to have clinical trial registry. But more importantly, to reduce duplication of research and all, especially in limited resource settings. We know that there's a multiple number of trials that are being conducted across the world, but you don't want to be duplicating what someone else has done. But like, if you remember the point that I mentioned about science and research, is that we're adding on to knowledge. And if we don't have enough resources, a clinical trial registry offers that opportunity for researchers to collaborate and ensure that the body of research or the knowledge of research keeps on expanding, because we are not duplicating or repeating the same thing that has been done. So now I'm taking you back to why SANCTR, the South African National Clinical Trial Register. And I actually put this slide here to kind of, for us to reflect what is SANCTR, because one would say there's clinicaltrial.gov, there's also PECTA, there's also other registries. But for the South African National Clinical Trial Register, it's actually a tool that our government or the Department of Health is using also, in addition to the other things that I have mentioned, to monitor and monitor and manage, kind of like see what is happening in terms of clinical trials in South Africa. And that has been enshrined in the SAGCP guideline, because before you can actually conduct a clinical trial in South Africa, you need to have your trial registered with SANCTR. So it's actually a requirement that we register with SANCTR, even though you can register with other registries, like because we do understand that it's a responsibility of the sponsor or the PI to register a trial, but also do remember that in South Africa, per the SAGCP guideline, before you commence recruiting your participant, a trial needs to be registered with SANCTR. And what we need for trial registration in SANCTR is that we need ethics approval. That's a must. That's the minimum requirement for a study to be registered in SANCTR. You need ethics approval. And you will find that there are other studies where it would require what we call the national regulatory authorities, which is the SAPRA, which is the equivalent of the FDA in the US. We need to make sure that if your trial, requires, the ethics and the regulatory requirements, you need to make sure that those documents are available so that we can register your study in SANCTR. So that's just kind of like a brief of indicating or introducing SANCTR. And also, to indicate again is that the types of studies that are registered on SANCTR or in a clinical trial registry, because if you should remember that the reason why we had to redevelop the SANCTR database, it's been in existence for some time. We'll go through the timeline in the subsequent slide, but we had to redevelop it because there was a need to ensure that the registry or the South African National Clinical Trial Register conforms to WHO standards. And per the WHO standard is that we use the definition of what is a trial. And a clinical trial per WHO standards is that it's any research study that prospectively assigns human participants or group of humans to one or more health-related interventions to evaluate the effects of health outcomes. So this is the definition. This definition includes a phase 1 to a phase 4 trial. So that's what we are accepting in SANCTR, or accepting as a clinical trial, and what we would register in SANCTR. Just to recap on the history of SANCTR is that SANCTR was established following the international calls for registration of a clinical trial. So this comes way back, I think it was in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. And also the Department of Health commissioned that there should be an establishment of a clinical trial, a national clinical trial register back in 2005. And they have, while they were commissioning that, they made it mandatory or as a requirement, as I've indicated in the SAGCP guideline, that any trial conducted in South Africa from the 1st of December 2005 must register with SANCTR. And in 2015, we're just gonna run through the history just a little bit. In 2015, the SAMRC was then approached by the National Department of Health to redevelop the current or the database that was developed back in 2005, with the understanding that we already have a registry that conforms to WHO standard. It's a primary register, the only African primary register, which is the Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry. And then the Department of Health requested that the SAMRC revamped and redevelop the national registry so that it conforms to the international standards. And to mention that in 2005, SANCTR was housed at by Vet Health Consortium in Joburg. So they have developed it, and it has been working. But then while we were redeveloping, we had to look at how the redevelopment was done and try to see what is the most efficient way. And of course, the redevelopment also included a lot of stakeholder engagement to try and understand what is the best model or a best way of ensuring that there's the seamless trial registration in South Africa. Because if you remember, and if you had used the old SANCTR databases, that there's two interfaces. One where it's called the NH-REC app, and then that information gets shifted into the SANCTR database. And I think at that time, when the discussions were happening, there was an understanding that eventually, there was going to be some alignment and integration of the two systems, where there's one point of entry, but that information can be filtered into the registry. But nonetheless, that never happened, which is something that we are still in discussion with many organizations and organizations that are involved in clinical trial registry, to look at ensuring that there is seamless and reducing the administrative burden of clinical trial registration in South Africa for the researchers, because we do acknowledge that there's a lot of application processes that needs to go. You have to apply for ethics, you have to submit documentation to SANCTR, to SAPRA. So there's multiple application processes that needs to happen for a trial to start in South Africa, which can impede or be an inhibitor to actually get solutions for our health problems. But we are working on that. As a one step forward is that this year, in June 2020, we have actually went live with the redeveloped SANCTR database. It's been up since June, and we ran a period of kind of like piloting phase just to see what are the challenges, because you remember, as I've mentioned, there were two interfaces. What are the challenges with the model or the system that we have adopted? And the new SANCTR system, we have redeveloped it to kind of like meet the WHO standards. So we wanted to understand what are the challenges, what are the gaps, and understanding what is known there. So we have collected a lot of information around that that will guide us in the next steps of how we move into seamless and improved systems for trial registration. So I have mentioned this before, that there are registries available, but for a South African researcher, in particular, there are two registries that you can submit your trial in. The one is, of course, the South African National Clinical Trial Registry, which requires ethics approval for your DOH number assignment, which I'm gonna call, because we call it DOH number assignment, because we didn't want to lose the term that was used in the previous SANCTR system, but basically it basically means that we give you the approval to go ahead and start conducting your trial in South Africa. So the DOH number is very important when you want to conduct your clinical trial. And it needs to be received prior to starting recruitment, as it is outlined in the SAGCP guideline. The Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry, it fulfills the WHO and the ICMJE mandate. So the ICMJE mandate, it's the group of editors that came together way back before, I think in 2004, and recognized that there is a need to ensure that trials that need to be published have been registered in a primary register, which is a WHO primary register. So we're lucky in a sense that in South Africa, we've got the Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry, which we are hosting at Cochrane, South Africa. So if you've got questions, I'm sure Elizabeth is on the call. She's the project manager for the Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry. But of course, you can always even send queries and any questions around the registry. And what is important to note is that between PACTA and SANCTR, one may ask a question, but where do I register between the two? Which is a thing of coordination between the two registries, because SANCTR, as yet, we just went live. So we are in a process of ensuring that we go through the process of getting the status at WHO that now we are either a partner registry or a primary registry to fulfill the mandate. So if you're thinking around ensuring that you want to publish your findings and your study, your findings of a clinical trial, probably PACTA would be suitable, but to fulfill the SAGCP guideline, you need to register with SANCTR. And also the two registries allow for secondary IDs. So whichever one we will be able to see from which registry you have registered with the unique number. So what is important is that when you are conducting a trial in South Africa, always start with SANCTR, have that number to fulfill the SAGCP guideline. And if then you want to publish, then PECTA would be your place to go, because at the moment we are still in the process to ensure that SANCTR as well fulfill the WHO and the ICMJ requirements. Then you in South Africa, then we can, once we have sorted that, you will be able to just come to the South African National Clinical Trial Register to register your trial. So just introducing the new SANCTR, this is how it looks like. So the URL is right there, which is sanctr.samrc.ac.za. Please take note of that URL. So for any new trials that need to be registered in SANCTR, this is the URL that you need to be using. If you're using the old one, which is the NHREC system, unfortunately, I would not be able to see those trials in order to process and ensuring that you get your DOH number. So it's really important that we have all the new trials registered using this URL. And I'm just going to take you through some steps as to how do you register as a user, and also how you can capture your trial information. I'm not sure, Tamara, are there any questions? I see there's something busy there on the chat that we can take before we can go ahead.
Hey, Dudu, thanks, and thanks so much for the presentation so far. We have an interesting and good question from Melda, which is about, is it a requirement for the NDOH number prior to recruitment? Is it applicable for community-based trials, i.e. trials that are not in a facility?
Trials not in a facility. Community-based trials. I would say yes, because remember the definition of a clinical trial. If it's it involves human participants, and you are looking you are testing an intervention, whether there's one group or the other group, whether it's behavioral, whether it's a surgical equipment, you want to test all of that in a human. I think that's the key thing. In a human, it's not really about a facility. The key thing is about there's a human element, or you want to test your intervention in a human. And just to indicate as well that it's important that even if you're unsure whether it's applicable to SANCTR or not, I would advise that it's good that you submit your trial. Let's have a conversation about it as I'm reviewing your trial, so that we can make, we can then advise better as to whether it's suitable for SANCTR or not. But what is key and what is important is that it involves human participants, and we are testing an intervention, in humans. Yeah, I think that would be my answer, Tamara. Is there another question?
I think it's a good point. I wonder if you want to put up that definition for people to look at while I pull. There was one more question here from Inga. Is when will we know if SANCTR is a primary registry, fulfills the publishing requirements, and we only need to register on SANCTR, so they don't have to register on two databases? So that is another good question about how we've managed to streamline the SANCTR, how we're hoping to streamline SANCTR's value.
Yeah, that's a good question. But to answer that question, Tamara, is that we would have to do like a number of webinars like this, just to share the information and ensuring that everyone knows, what's happening in terms of child registration in South Africa, whether you go to PECTA or you go to SANCTR. Fortunate enough is that um, both the registries are housed at Cochrane, South Africa. So there is a conversation between the two registries and we are managing both. So that would be a conversation that we will share with everyone when the time comes, and to just illustrate or demonstrate the process that we still have to take in ensuring that a trial SANCTR or the SANCTR database is a primary register. We have to go through a process to WHO. We apply to WHO, and WHO will have to come and do an audit of the system. So it's kind of like a process to do that. I can't give an exact answer as to when, but once we know, surely we will be communicating.
Thank you, Dudu. Thanks, and thanks. I think the definition up is
Thanks,
also
Tamara. Is
very
there
clear.
another question?
Yes. Dudu, thanks. So the other question, yes. So is from Jeff. Hi, Jeff. So what is the need for why do we need multiple platforms? How different would the platforms be?
That's an interesting question.
Yes.
It's a good
I mean,
question. Yes, Tamara.
yeah, no, I was just having worked with you on this. I was also thinking it's a good question, but I'm happy to discuss with you as well on an input.
Yeah. There's ideally we shouldn't have multiple platforms, and as I've mentioned with the new SANCTR database, as you know, we were requested by the Department of Health to come over to the SAMRC platform. There was a recognition that from the Department of Health side that they want to be a standalone registry. But that conversation we're still having, because I do understand that, it's going to be too much. It's duplication of effort because the systems are doing the same, and ideally we want the same, one platform that is seamless in South Africa, that can register trials for South Africa and Africa as well. So that's a conversation that we are still having with the Department of Health, and hopefully we would be able to resolve that. But at the moment, unfortunately, we have the two platforms that are there, and we are trying by all means to make sure that there isn't any confusion, just to make that distinction that for now SANCTR is fulfilling the SAGCP guideline, or SAGCP guideline, and then PECTA it's for the ICMJ mandate, and you are able to publish your trial there. So it's an ongoing conversation that we need to have, and ideally what we would love to do is to have SANCTR partnering with PECTA, because already we do have PECTA available. So what would work is that SANCTR feeds information to PECTA, and then PECTA is the one that sends information to WHO. So those are the discussions that we are having with the Department of Health. Are there more
That is
questions?
good news.
Mhm.
Yes, thanks, Dudu. There is just one question about the previous the WHO clinical trial definition highlights phase 1 to 4, phase 4 research, right? The definition we're going with SANCTR. But the previous SANCTR did include phase 1. They said because of intellectual property issues and whatever it was, that when they set that up in 2005, they had some other definition. Is this still the case? Are we going with the old definition or the new or the WHO adherent definition? That's the question. Thanks.
We're going with this definition, the WHO definition, because we had, when we were looking at the definition of what is a clinical, how does SANCTR define a clinical trial, we had to have that conversation with multiple stakeholders to ensure that we've got the definition right. And this is the definition that we all agreed upon, that this would be what we consider as a clinical trial to be registered in SANCTR. Are there more questions?
Nothing at the moment, but thank you.
Oh,
Thanks, Dudu. Over back to you.
all right, okay. So now we'll just move over to, here's the new SANCTR. It's very colorful, very green. It's got, the South African flag. So what you see as you click on that URL, there's a number of tabs that you can access, or you can get information. And the information that I have just shared with you in terms of SANCTR and the history and where it comes from, you can find it in the homepage, in the landing page of SANCTR. So that information is there. And there's also a tab next to the homepage where you can find the contact details of who are we, who is working on the SANCTR, the SANCTR team, the working group, and we also have members of a steering group committee, where they have also helped us a lot, and we need to really appreciate their guidance and their support in getting to where we are in terms of getting the SANCTR database live. They have shaped the discussions, and the steering committee members included a number of stakeholders from NHRD. So NHRD, those are they are NHRD. It's a system that the Department of Health is using to kind of like manage trials that are conducted at the health facilities. So that's the one. And then we had representation also from SAPRA. Also, they were guiding us as well as, in terms of the processes and what we need. We had representation from SAPRA. We had representation from the National Health Research Ethics Committee as well, guiding us in the process of redesigning and redeveloping the database. So I just wanted to send my thanks to the steering committee for helping us and driving this conversation or to get to a point of where we are in terms of clinical trial, the SANCTR, that we are live, we can have a database that we can go now and register trials in South Africa. So after that, then there's a tab, why do you need to register, which is the information that I have shared also at the beginning of the presentation. You can go to that tab and get more information. There's also links to resources So I would really encourage everyone to explore that tab and find more information on why do we need a clinical trial register. There's many resources that you can access. There's also a map, and the map it's really to show where are the recruitment site location, because we do collect the information on recruitment sites. So if, for example, you want to see how many or where are COVID-19 trials being conducted in Cape Town, you can actually go to the map and search COVID-19. It will actually show you in the map where exactly where is the recruitment site. That is also helpful for researchers or participants that want to participate in any trial. They can access SANCTR or any other, or even PECTA, because PECTA also has the same. You can access the map and see if you want to participate in those recruitment sites, because there's also contact information of who are the PI, what studies are happening there, and that's also an opportunity to foster collaborations. If, for example, you want to collaborate with other researchers that are conducting research or clinical research in the same field, and maybe you don't have resources, but it would be better to collaborate. So that's also another good resource that you could use. And then the next tab is about contacting us. So you can contact us if you've got queries, challenges about registration. I get emails all the time in terms of the queries. And also the next one, it's about, I'm looking at the time, the search function. The search function, you can always go to the search function, which will go to in detail and search for any trials that are conducted in or that are registered in SANCTR. There's a login and a register as a user tab, and also a new trial if you want to register a new trial. So let's see how it works. So you would go into the home page, and if you are a new user, I would encourage that you click on that tab, register user, where you can capture your information as a user. And once you have done that, then you are able to log in into the SANCTR database. If, for example, you are an existing user, or you had a trial from the old or the previous SANCTR database, what you need to do, where you see there's the Ndwande there, you enter your email address as you had used previously, and then what you do, you need to reset your password and click on forgot password. An email will be generated and it will go straight into your mailbox, where it will give you a temporary password that you can then use and reset your new password that you can use into the new SANCTR system. And once you are logged in, you can then play around with the tabs. And if you play around with the tabs, and I think what is much more important for today's discussion is that if you want to register a new trial, you go to the tab which is called trials. And if you want to register a new one, you click on the first kind of like tab, and then you capture information. I'll show you a screenshot of what you need to, what information needs to be captured. And then the next tab, which is My Trials, you can manage all your trials that are linked to your profile. Remember, in the old SANCTR databases that there was an institutional login details that were, was available. For example, at Cochrane South Africa, we have one institutional login details. So Tamara, myself, Elizabeth, and whoever can use the same login detail to go and register their trial. In the new SANCTR database, a profile is linked to an email address. So we have generated a profile for an individual. So an individual linked to the email address will have a profile. So all the trials that are linked to that email address will get a profile, and you'll be able to see all those trials. And I am aware that as we moved across, there were some studies that, when you log on in your profile, you don't see all your studies. I'm working with IT to resolve that, because we can move profiles around because we change ownership. We call that as change ownership. So I can search for the trial and ask IT to locate the trial in the system. It's not that your trial is lost, it's in the system, but it's all about who registered it. Because the system, when we went live, it looked for the email address and took the email address and created a profile. So it's mainly looking for that person, that email address, and then looking for that trial that was registered by that person, and then change the ownership into the person. All I would ask is that you would send me the list of the trials that you are looking for, and I will search for those trials and work with IT so that we can change the ownership. So that has been a bit of a challenge because as people start using the new SANCTR database, they recognize that their trials are not there. But I need to assure you that your trials are not lost. They are still there. It's a matter of locating the trial who registered it, so that we can change the ownership and give it to the person that would be accessing that trial going forward. Trial sites is the one that takes you to the map where you can see the information on recruitment sites. So when you capture your trial, so basically you go to the home page, register a trial. So these are the tabs that you have to complete and make sure that the trial, trial information is there. And I need to stress and emphasize that we are collecting far more information than the previous SANCTR database. And what I have noticed is that there are some trials that have moved across. There's missing information because the systems are different. So I will on the SANCTR system, I've already indicated, please update information. So it's really important for all researchers that have trials in SANCTR to just access the system and just check your trials and making sure that your information is updated, because the old system did not capture as much information that we are capturing now. And what we capture here is that the system will not allow you to actually click on submit if not all the fields or the required fields are completed sufficiently. Like if you want to know which ones are the required fields, is that you look at the asterisk. That's a mandatory field. You have to complete that. The system will not allow you to click submit. And what I have seen also happening is that I just screenshot this page. It's short. What is coming up when you look at the very bottom here, SAPRA approval requirement, you have a yes and a no. And it becomes very interesting when you had said SAPRA approval required and you say yes. And then when you get to the tab of approvals, you would need, the system recognizes that you need to have ethics approval and SANCTR approval. Otherwise, it would not allow you to submit your trial. So make sure that you are sure that your trial requires ethics approval or SANCTR approval. And if it doesn't require SANCTR approval, you have to, on the trial details section, you have to click on no, so that you can only capture the ethics approval in order for the system to allow you to submit. So I'm just going to run quickly on the system, but make sure that as you are capturing the information, it turns a darker green color. Then you know that you have captured everything, and it will say done at the end. But with the approvals, even though it will say done, but just double check on the SANCTR approval and cross check with the trial details, because that it can say done, but it would not allow you to submit because you had indicated that the trial requires SANCTR. You can also manage your trial. This is a trial that I used as you know, to check the system. So you can see what is happening with my trial. You can check your progress of what is happening. So there are multiple statuses. What is important here is to look at the statuses of where your trial is. If it's denied, then you know that your trial did not get was not approved in SANCTR, and you will get an email telling you that your trial has not been denied. If it's approved, again, you will get an email with an approval letter to indicate that your trial has been approved with your DOH number. If it's in draft, unfortunately, draft trials, I would not be able to see them until it's submitted, because it's what you are currently working on and you have not submitted. And if it says in progress, that's the other status. If it says in progress, it's an indication that we are looking at your trial, because I'm working closely with the Department of Health. When we look at the trial, and it still has to go to Department of Health, and they assign the DOH number. So when it says in progress, just know that your trial has been, attention has been given to your trial. If it's incomplete, then it means that we have reverted the trial back to you to correct information. So it's really important to take note of those statuses when you go to your profile. So this is the map that I was talking about, where you can just, you know, look at what is happening. For example, in this one, I looked at education and training, and it showed me, you know, the location of where trials that are focusing on education and training are located, basically. The search function, you can always go to the search function and get information of what is available in the SANCTR database. If, for example, you want COVID-19 trials, as I have done here, you can search there, and you can open the key trial information. It will give you snippets of the trial information, and it will give you information about the eligibility criteria of the trial, the contact details of the PI or the people that you need to contact in relation to the trial. And also it tells you about whether our results are available or not. So that's also another place to play around. There's also an advanced search where you can then use Boolean operators to search for things that you want. But if you need more information on the trials, I would advise that you contact me so that I can share the information in detail, because we have kind of like limited you know, who has so much information. even though the information is accessible, you can see it, but if you want more, for example, you want to conduct research on studies that are conducted in South Africa, then I can pull out, you know, like a data set, and we understand why you need that information for. So this one, it's about a feedback session. It's right at the bottom of the SANCTR database. You can always talk to us and just write what you want us to hear. And I see a lot of people are using the contact us page, and that would, it helps us a lot also to know what is happening in terms of feedback that we need to give. So I think, Tamara, I will pause there because this is a sum up. The next one, maybe I can take questions before we can wrap up.
Thanks, Dudu. I think, okay, so there are a few questions. One was about whether people could use PACTA instead of SANCTR, and I did respond based on what you presented earlier that SANCTR is mandated by South African GCP. But there's some other questions here in our last literally 2 minutes. What are the turnaround times from submission to full registration from Vuyokazi? Thanks, Vuyokazi.
So turnaround time per the SAGCP guideline currently stands at 2 days. So we're working on ensuring that there is that 2 days turnaround time.
So the turnaround is not to full registration, but maybe at least for a response, or just to clarify, Dudu.
Yeah, for a response. So the SAGCP guideline says that you get your DOH number within 2 days, right? But of course, since we have gone live, there has been, you know, I would say not adhering to the 2 days because of challenges, network issues, and things like that. But we are hoping that we will actually give you a feedback within 2 days that you have registered your trial, whether there's something missing or whatever. But within 2 days, you will be able to hear from us after you have submitted.
Thanks, Dudu. And I guess it depends on whether you receive a complete information or not. So thank you. And so from Jeff also, do we do quality assurance in terms of the inputs on the platform now compared to the previous SANCTR?
Yes, I do that. And that's why I would then revert back the trial to the trial list if I see that there's something that doesn't add up. And a lot of things had been around sample sizes. Anticipated sample size would be 10, and then when you look at the group allocations, you find that there's the numbers don't add up. Then I revert back the trial to the trial list to correct the information. Yeah.
Dudu. And the last question I think we can take is from Inga. Thanks, Inga. Can the PI delegate someone to register the trial on SANCTR?
Of course, yes. The PI can delegate someone else, like a regulatory person, to be responsible for registering trials. So that can be done.
Dudu, thank you so much. And thanks, Inga, Jeff, all the colleagues, Vuyokazi, for your questions and all the inputs. But particularly thank you to Dudu and the team behind the scene and the steering group for this excellent presentation and this great development and advancement with clinical trial registration in South Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I was going to give them a homework, but that's okay. Next time.
Oh, okay. There's a trick question up for everyone to make sure we've understood all the key messages. But thank you, Dudu, for such a clear presentation. Thank you everyone for your participation. Excellent. We've got the crib notes, and and please, as Dudu says, you can complete the contact us form and you can be in touch directly, and we will certainly try to answer all your questions. There are the contact details.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity for us to present. And yeah, we're looking forward to many more sessions because there's far more that we can learn from SANCTR and share with colleagues and everyone about the new SANCTR database. Thank you, Tamara.
Excellent. Thank you, Dudu. And thanks to everyone here. All the best, everyone. We will be in touch with the future webinars coming up on our Cochrane monthly webinar series. So thanks everyone for your participation, and Dudu particularly.
Thank you so much.